Hi, welcome to the Association of Corporate Growth's Corporate Executives Austin San Antonio Roundtable. We're so glad that you're here. We started CEASAR in order to give an opportunity for our growth-oriented owners and C-suite people to have a chance to gather together and talk about the challenges and opportunities that they are going through. So we're really glad to have you here. Today, we are presenting Chad McNair. He's the Executive Director of McNair Java Partners. He's also the founder of Aspen Beverages, so he's going to tell you a little bit about that. He's going to be talking about the 4 M's of business. It should be really a fascinating session. We have these once a month, the roundtable once a month, and we always have a speaker, a guest speaker. This will be our second one. Our third one will be in September. And we also have a mastermind, which I'll tell you about in just a moment, that follows 2 weeks later. We really thank our annual chapter sponsors, Weaver, Dykema, Asperity, and Higher Better. And our agenda today, well, we'll start with some introductions, and these will be quick, so about 30 seconds each, just kind of introducing ourselves. Then we'll have Chad speak on his subject matter, and he'll be speaking on the 4 M's of business, plus some other powerful business tools, and then we'll have questions and discussion and networking afterwards. So please feel free to put your chat, go into the chat, put your contact information, and also any questions that you have, or Chad will also just answer questions since we're a small group just off of the computer screen. Again, we have that mastermind coming up 2 weeks after each session, and that is by invitation only too. It really is about 10 minutes. Each person gets to really dive in onto what they're doing and really kind of look at things a little bit more closely. So that's really valuable for those who wish to dive a little bit deeper. Susan Vaughn is our Executive Vice President of ACG, and she's going to talk a little bit about ACG.
Thank you, Carrie. So guys, I think that most of us here are members, but for anybody who's not, I've got to tell you, it just feels like the benefits have increased almost since we have been going through COVID. There's just so many resources and so many opportunities to connect, not only with our own chapter, but with the chapters across the U.S. and even globally. So if any of you aren't aware, you do have the capability to find any contacts that you might desire or need through our database, which is, again, global and has direct contact to the members. A couple of other things to mention, if you've not stumbled upon it, is Growth TV, which I am loving because it's just, I know that some of us are getting a little bit of webinar fatigue, but these are just like 10-minute bite-sized kinds of informational interviews, and they are really fantastic. There's right around 50 of them on any given subject related to M&A. So take a look at those. I want to also remind you that on August the 14th, our chapter is partnering with ACG Detroit and ACG Columbus, as well as Dykema, and we're going to hear from Joseph Tracy from the Federal Reserve Bank on the economic outlook. Also, Dykema will be doing a review of their COVID M&A flash survey results, and then there will be networking afterwards. So hope you'll plan on joining us. Again, that's August the 14th at 9 a.m. and Sarah will post the details in the chat. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Susan. So what I'd like to do is go around and everybody introduce themselves and just give a brief description of themselves. I will start and then I'll call on people. I'm Carrie Vanston. I am the CEO of the Alligator Wrangler, and I help people that are up to their necks in alligators get out by increasing their energy and leadership and mindsets so they can achieve their goals quicker and with less stress. One way I do that is with an assessment that shows where you're under stress and when you're under normal circumstances. And I have 2 kids that live with me, 12 and 15. So maybe everybody can kind of share kind of what's going on at home too with COVID going on, that we're so stuck there. Andy, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andy Fogarasi. I'm a former founder and CEO of a company in Austin called Parkstree.com, $20 million e-commerce and distribution company. Sold it a few years back and was planning a little family adventure with my wife of 20 years and my daughter, Leah, who is 11 and a half years old today, so she gets a half birthday cake. And we've also got a German Shepherd here hanging with us by the name of Wick. Now, because COVID kind of changed our lives a little bit, our big family adventure is on hold for a while, and I'm in the middle of a little pivot and figuring out what to do with the next 3 to 5 years. Restarted my consulting company, Austin Beta, and I'm just trying to see which direction I can go. So that's my place.
Thanks, Andy. What about you, Christine?
Sure. I started a consulting firm, Gladiator Consulting, 4.5 years ago, going on 5 years, which is insane to me. We do business planning and strategic marketing. So everything from understanding what your company does and creating some goals together to defining what your marketing strategy should be. And then we have a team that helps with implementation where our clients need marketing support. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old at home, and we're getting ready to learn how to teach kindergarten and 2nd grade.
Thank you. How about you, Susan?
Thanks, Carrie. Susan Vaughn again. I'm about going on 8 years with Insperity now as an advisor. And prior to that, I owned a couple of businesses. So I am an empty nester. We have 3 kids. I have 3 kids of my own, and I have a stepson. And so we don't have the complications and the challenges that a lot of you guys do with little ones at home and how to educate and entertain them. But I am missing out on a lot of family trips that, often get pushed to the summer. So kind of missing the family a lot, but it's been a good ride for work. We have very high utilization of services right now. So I've been very busy. It's been a nice distraction from what's going on to stay busy, and even on the client acquisition side, we're really being successful at bringing on new clients. So it's all good.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Bill?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Get off of mute there. So yeah, I'm Bill Colwell. I'm the president of KB Max and one of the co-founders. It's a software company here in Austin. And I actually have an office in Flint Rock in Lakeway, but I'm at my home office today because I stay here more than in the office because of COVID, and it's just a little more convenient. But I'm in my bedroom office today because my wife, who Carrie knows very well, is upstairs doing an online a yoga class right now. She had to pivot with COVID, so she went from in-person to actually doing online Zoom. She had to learn how to do Zoom and all that. It's been interesting to watch. So I got an office upstairs, but she's kind of loud when she does her yoga. So just my company is, we're in the CPQ space. It's kind of a niche thing. So it's configure, price, and quote. It's associated to Salesforce and Oracle CRM, those kind of CRM. We get enhanced CRM basically, but we actually do engineering automation also is our differentiator. And we focus on customer experience. We have 3D visualization and augmented reality tools that add to customer experience quality. And we're about 40 people now. We started from scratch in 2009, and now we're about 40 people and growing at about 50% growth rate per year. So it's a crazy ride, and we're trying to hang on, and we're hiring right now. COVID has slowed us down a little bit, but we started our whole company as a culture of remote culture. Oh boy, and I'm always getting interrupted. But anyway, so everybody works from their home office except for me, that I have an office with my admin here in Austin. So we learned the ropes of this pretty quick. And we kind of laugh at our customers that are struggling with it now. They have to work at home and have kids and pets running around. So that's lucky for me. My kids are great kids, and they're in their 30s now, so they're out of the nest. And I even have grandkids, but known Carrie a long time. We love Carrie, and she's one of my wife's sister's best friends, I guess, and she's a great dancer and a great artist also. So you gotta watch that for her. That's how my wife and her sister know Carrie. So anyway, quick nutshell. Yeah.
Thanks. Will?
Sure. Will Thomas. I'm actually based in Salt Lake in ACG, Utah. I just was scanning the events and thought this looked interesting, so thanks for having me. I work for Blue Orange Digital. We're a data science agency, so helping companies make better decisions with their data, unify data sets across the company, visualizations, machine learning, essentially end-to-end data analytics. And at home, I have a fiance here. Unfortunately, COVID did delay our wedding, so we bumped it to next year. But outside of that, things are pretty good.
Great. Thank you, Will. Lori?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Mish with Blacklight Solutions. I'm the Vice President of Strategy. And Blacklight provides software development and web applications for middle market companies. We do a lot of data lake setups, customer portals, and using business analytics for companies to gain more insight with their data. As I mentioned, I think before, I'm in the process of looking for a dog as a companion for my 10-year-old son who is home. And we'll be homeschooling, obviously, in the fall. Haven't found the dog yet. Trying to figure out what AISD is going to do and what resources are going to be needed. So it's, it's interesting always, and we'll just kind of have to face the new challenges of this new way of life, especially this fall, and see what comes of it.
Thank you, Lori. Charu? Oh, I can't hear you.
Okay, guys, back-to-back meetings today. Long day already. Thanks for having me. Carrie, thank you so much. I think these events are really going great.
It's hard to hear you. Can you either talk louder or turn up your volume or something?
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, I've been very slow then. I need to really be sharp here. So I said it's a long day for me today. It started almost 7:30, so been busy throughout the day today actually, but it's good sometimes. Thank you, Carrie, for having us. This is really nice to meet everyone at least once or twice in a month through these events. This is a good feeling. What do we do? My company is InnoSec, which is Innovative Security. It's in the security and compliance space, mainly work in governance, risk, compliance, and security. It's very hot topics, and almost every organization needs some kind of help in this space. So COVID doesn't impact us much. It's ongoing, and we do really well in this space. Surprisingly, my company is small. It's almost like 15 people company, but we are growing. At the same time, our client size is also growing. We have clients from like $10 million to all the way $6 billion companies. So it's really good ride. Then we are putting a new product called Secure Retain, which is in the space of online e-learning platform, again for GRC and security. Name is Secure Retain. We are buying a new platform, LMS system. It will be live from September 1st week. Just to give a little dip, but I'll send an email to everyone about it. On a personal side, my daughter is in genetics, so it helps me a lot to understand what's going on with the COVID-19 and all that situation. She explains it better. And now planning for her college. She's trying to travel on within the next 2 weeks to the college. So let's see how that whole thing goes. That's where we are. My wife works with me on the different projects. She's a big reader. Everything behind at the back, there are almost 2,000 books in this house. Nearly 90% belong to her, not to me. So guys, just to give you an idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charu. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Singer. I'm with ACG ASA San Antonio. I am at home with my husband and my almost out of the nest daughter. She's 18 and about to go off to college. I'm really happy to see you all, and I'll turn it back over to Carrie.
Great, thank you, everybody. So we're really honored today to have Chad McNair. He is the Executive Director of McNair Java Products, and he's also the founder of Aspen Beverages. He began his coffee business in 1988 with the development of a liquid coffee extract operation based in Houston, later moved to San Antonio. He actually lives in San Antonio. It's a high quality coffee concentrate that was bottled for home use for base for iced and frozen coffee beverages. After 24 years of growing his business, he sold it to become the largest cold brew coffee manufacturer globally. He sold the business in 2017 and formed a family office, McNair Java Partners, where he engages in investing and launching new business ventures. He also serves on a variety of for-profit and nonprofit boards. Thank you very much. Chad, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Carrie. Thank you all for those introductions. Very interesting group here, and I feel like maybe I ought to be taking notes and learning from all of you. So maybe I end up just being a facilitator of a great discussion today, because there's obviously a lot of great experience in this group, and nice sized group as well, so we can actually get into some things. So I don't know how the facilitation of questions will be handled, but if there are questions along the way, if you can get somebody's attention and we can stop and discuss, that would be terrific. Don't mind doing that. I'm going to move through what the title of my talk was, the 4 M's, which actually comes from a book by Doug Tatum, and I was at a conference with him. It's called No Man's Land. He held a conference in Austin at the Country Club a number of years ago, and I attended that prior to the sale of my company, and it was actually very, very helpful in structuring the last couple of years and going into the sale of the company, in understanding the 4 M's, and adding to that, I'll have a few other business practices that I picked up along the way from consultants and board members and others that have helped me immensely in growing my business. I'm a civil engineer out of the University of Illinois, and kind of elbowed my way into Texas back in 1982 when the economy was pretty tough. And I did that for a number of years, and then got involved in the coffee business. Met a family over in Houston that made a small coffee extractor for home brewing. And one thing led to another, and I pretty soon was bottling coffee in the back of their warehouse. 1988, 89 was too early for that market. I thought it would be a terrific market. I shut it down and relaunched it in 93. And at that time, my wife was a captain in the Air Force. She finished at Baylor College of Medicine. She's a pediatrician. And I was unemployed and looking for the next step, thinking we only had a year left in San Antonio back in 93, because she was being in the military, thought we'd end up having to move. So I started Aspen Beverage at that time, and with $1,000 and a promise to Shelley and the Lord we'd never borrow any money. And we ended up growing that business, just nickel and diming it to get to where we were 24 years later. And so made that promise that we'd never borrow any money. We never did. We never had a line of credit. We never had any outside investors. It was an interesting ride with a lot of challenges, and learned an awful lot from that experience. Sold the company in June of 2017 for just shy of $50 million. And that was quite a ride for a $1,000 startup company. And much of the experience and what I'll share with you today came from those years, and a lot of good advice along the way. So with that, I'm just going to jump in and cover these topics, the 4 M's of business, again, which come from No Man's Land. And I suggest No Man's Land, this book by Doug Tatum, terrific read, great resource for really understanding. And it's really helped me understand that their business is really pretty simple when you boil it down to these 4 M's. So we'll go through that. And then we'll go through the SWOT analysis, which I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. And then MBOSS, which may be a new concept. And we'll finish with advisory boards. So quite a bit of material to cover. I'm going to kind of read through this first section here and talk about it. Again, if there's any questions or comments, most of this is pretty simple and kind of common sense and basic, but I'm a pretty simple guy. And I find that if I can keep it real simple, I do much better with it. The more complex things become, the more difficult it is to implement and to manage. And so I like to keep things very simple. So today we're talking about managing business, and I'm going to offer some of these resources and tools for doing that. You may have heard the saying that you can only manage that which you can measure. So it's important to know three things about that: what to measure, how to measure, and why to measure. For example, you may know that you need to measure cash flow, but you may not know how to do that properly, or even that it's important. And not knowing what to measure or how to do it accurately, or even why you're being asked to measure something by investors or upper management, can create a lot of tension in an organization. And measuring too much can be just as harmful as not measuring enough. Quite often we get carried away with KPIs, the key performance indicators, or measuring things that really aren't important. And as that body of information grows, it gets very difficult to sort out what's truly important and what's not. I'm reminded of a story of Vietnam War fighter pilots during that time. They advanced the electronics on those fighter planes so much that there were all sorts of warnings and alarms that would go off, flashing lights and horns and so on. And it got to the point where a lot of those pilots would just shut all that off because they really only need to know one thing: is there a missile that's about to take me out? And that's what they really wanted to know. And so you can get overloaded with information to the point where you really don't see the critical missile that may take out your business. So it's important to know what level of information is important and try to get rid of the clutter and the distractions. Measuring or putting all this together then is the responsibility of the manager. And that's, I'm assuming, it sounds like everybody here is in management or running their own business. So that's what I'll really speak to, more the entrepreneurial side of things. The next step is knowing how to present the information. And if you know the what, how, and why, but are not able to communicate the results in a meaningful way to the various stakeholders, the information may be somewhat helpful, but not very powerful, and may cause even more confusion as various parties interpret the data in their own way, drawing their own conclusions. And I've seen this time and again. We'll collect this data. I might have it, maybe a little bit of upper management, but if others aren't brought into that circle to be able to understand why we're collecting it, sometimes it can be very difficult to get the information from people, or it's collected in the wrong way or in a manner that's just not helpful. And so the communication on how to present it back to people so they can understand why you're doing it and what the purpose is extremely important. So management's very important. About 90% of new business ventures fail in the first 3 years. That sounds kind of worse than it is. Most business ventures are 1 or 2 people. But nonetheless, they're dreams and visions that people have had, and they've worked hard at it, maybe invested a lot, and 90% of those dreams fail in the first 3 years. And much of that is due to poor or inadequate management. So again, most of you are managers, and maybe some are entrepreneurs. Only about 5 or 10% of the business in an economy is entrepreneurial, introducing new ideas, methods, or solutions. And that's the world I live in, so that's what I'll be focusing on today. But no matter what kind of organization you belong to, the fact that you're part of the Association for Corporate Growth would suggest that you're here because you want to grow. When a venture is small and just starting out, the entrepreneur is often able to manage through sheer willpower and energy that holds everything together. But in order to grow, the organization must be able to institutionalize the entrepreneur's core competitive advantage so it can be leveraged into a sustainable value proposition. This core competitive advantage has to be identified and isolated if it is to be institutionalized. And this can most easily be done by answering one of the best questions any business can ask: what can we do better than anybody else in the world? That one question allowed me a number of years ago to strategize, organize, and focus on the things that we could do extremely well. And we made some very, very tough decisions leading up to our spectacular growth of about 60% a year over a 5-year period. that may not sound like much to people from the software or consulting business, but in manufacturing, in food and beverage manufacturing, 60% growth is a pretty enormous growth level to achieve year over year, because you have to have labor, you have to have equipment, you have to have warehousing, you have to have logistics. It's very, very difficult to do that well. So this idea of trying to figure out what we could do better than anybody else, and then outsourcing whatever we couldn't do. So if we used to do our own janitorial work, and we said, well, there's other people that can do that better than us. Our logistics, we found out there was people that could do that better than our team could do it. So we would outsource logistics, and we got down to the core functions that nobody else could do, and that we could do better than anybody else in the world. And if it didn't have to do with that, we really tried to get rid of it out of our business. And that caused a decline in revenue for a while, because we were getting rid of some products that were bringing in revenue, but didn't help us with our core strategy. So that can be a very difficult pruning process, but it was very, very helpful. So let's, from there, just kind of with that as background, dive into the 4 M's that Doug Tatum talks about in his book. And those 4 M's, just to put them right up front, are market, model, management, and money. And if you can address each one of those, you've pretty well got business covered. And we can make it much more complex and much more difficult. But if you really understand those 4 M's as you're trying to either grow your business or grow a new market segment or a new product line, thinking about those 4 M's, market, model, management, and money, are really critical. So the market, how do we align with customer needs? And getting this right is either life or death to a company. This is where innovation and being able to rotate to customer needs quickly can generate great rewards. But responding to customer needs is a two-edged sword. It's tempting to allow the customer needs to draw a company away from the core offering, or to expand beyond that focus that's needed to scale. And it's very difficult to scale if you've got a lack of focus and too many different projects going at the same time. And then also for the entrepreneur or the manager, often innovation and R&D can become a distraction or almost a drug used as an escape from the realities of the hardships of growing a business and having to make those hard decisions about what do we need to pare down rather than what do we need to innovate. Innovation is absolutely key, but it can become kind of a habit to just constantly innovate and then not be building the business and sticking with what really brought you to the dance. An example of that was of aligning with customer needs. I can go back to my early days in the coffee business. I was making cold brew coffee extracts. And I really wanted the market to be a real pure product. We would take that coffee and mix it with milk and put it in what's called a granita machine. It's basically a glorified name for a margarita machine. It would make a frozen coffee latte, if you will. And by adding our coffee to the milk, you ended up with an all-natural product. And I really felt the market would want an all-natural product. And there is a segment of the market that wanted an all-natural product. And when my customers would say, well, if I do that, I have to clean the machine every day because it's a dairy product and I can't leave it in overnight and so on. And I said, well, that's just the price you pay for an all-natural product and a real premium all-natural product. It wasn't until I really allowed my customer to speak into my mind and I developed a non-dairy powdered base as a milk substitute. And when I did that, my sales took off overnight, almost doubled overnight, because I finally listened to the customer telling me what they wanted rather than me trying to tell the customer what they ought to take and that they ought to want an all-natural product. Again, there were people that wanted that. That's what I wanted, but that's not what the marketplace wanted. That's not what my customer wanted. So aligning with those customer needs is absolutely critical in listening. We had to innovate. We had to create that base. We tried some on the market and they didn't work. So we had to innovate very quickly and react very quickly. Another part of this market is understanding, again, how to focus. There's a story in Doug Tatum's book here about a new owner of a company. And he called ahead and asked all the managers of all the various products to be prepared to meet in the boardroom when he arrived and have all the products lined up on the table, on this long conference table, in order of sales importance. And when they got there, they said, okay, is everything lined up according to our sales revenues and volumes? And they said, yeah, we've got them all lined up there. And he said, okay, show me where we stop at the top 80% of our sales. And they did that, and it was, as we often know, it was a very few number of items, and then the rest of the table were all these other items that made up about 20% of the sales. And he went down through the table just pushing these items off into the manager's laps, and he said, here's our company right here, what's left on the table, and that's what we're going to use to go forward. And their revenues and their profits, as you can imagine, took off because they focused and they got rid of the clutter and listened to what their customers really wanted, which was that top 80%. The next M we go to is model, and how does the firm make, this is directly related to how does the firm make money. Most companies start with the idea and enter the market with cheap labor and customized solutions. That's what I did. And cheap labor, I mean, I wasn't paying myself anything. For the first 3 years, I almost never took a paycheck. And even throughout the company history, I was always paying myself less. I would try to get people to come to work for me, and just for the excitement of being involved with our business and so on. And to a certain extent, you can do that. People will come and join an organization that's exciting, that's going somewhere. In fact, the Spurs managers will say that one of the reasons they did so well financially is because they developed a culture that you have people that wanted to come here and they were willing to take huge pay cuts to be a part of the organization. So that can happen for a while. You can get people to do that, but at the end of the day, most people want a paycheck and they want to be well rewarded for the work they're doing. So the idea of the entrepreneur starting out with cheap labor and customized solutions usually gets you in the door, but both of those break down at scale. So as you start to grow the company, people say, well, no, I'm not going to work for this anymore. I need to get market value. And then the customized solutions become more and more difficult to implement at scale. So you've got to come back and focus and try to, again, institutionalize your offerings. Ultimately, the model is a financial model that looks forward. And there's a critical skill that takes efforts of the whole team. The model has to be accurate in order to properly plan for and guide the enterprise. The importance of this is very evident in publicly traded companies. We see this all the time. The market punishes companies that miss their targets. And what's really bizarre about that is you'll see a company that misses their target and they did much better than what the analysts thought they ought to do or what the management had told the market they were going to do. And they still get punished and their stock price goes down. And it's because it's an indicator that management is out of touch with the business, and it's a reflection of a poor model. So that modeling is really critical. And being able to have a grasp on that model and to know how your business is performing against that model is extremely critical. Modeling takes time, experience, and a lot of what-if analysis. So I'm not much of I do spreadsheets. I'm not really good at them, but I use them all the time. And I do a lot of what-if analysis. And that really helps fine-tune the model when you can say, well, what if the market doesn't go as well? Or what if it goes real well? Or what if the price of the raw material goes up? And then the leader has to have a firm grip on that model, and it's imperative that the diversions for the expected path be addressed quickly. So when you see yourself getting off of what you expected for the model, being able to address that quickly and make adjustments is really important. And I always had my own spreadsheets so that I could track things that may not show up as quickly on a standard set of financial reports. KPIs are critical here, again, key performance indicators to make sure that you're still on track. I'm going through these quickly and kind of thin, because if you really want to dig into this book has got a lot of great examples of how this can be applied. The next M is management, and this is where execution is the key. I've already talked about some of the general keys to management, but I'd like to focus on the most important aspect of management, and that's people. We need people who complement the leader and then execute. I think quite often we're tempted to go find people, especially when we're just starting out and we're a small business and just a few people. We want to go find people that are just like us, that think like us, that have the same dreams as us. And that can be a pretty poor plan. We need people that complement the leadership and then people that can execute. And quite often the people that complement the leader are people that don't necessarily see the same things or see them in the same way. Collins, in his book, Good to Great, really focuses on this point. He talks about getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right seats. And if you haven't read that book, Good to Great, I would encourage you to do it. I would imagine almost anybody in business has read it. His comments about getting the right people on the bus, getting people in the right seat has just become common vernacular in the business world. So it's kind of like not having good command of a foreign language if you haven't read some of these great business books. But the key to the right people is really important. And it's usually the most important and the most painful part of a business. The people that help you grow when you were small are often not the people that you need in order to take you to the next level. But at the end of the day, if you treat people the way you want to be treated, you usually come out with a pretty good outcome, but you need to understand that there will be people that get upset when changes are made. I had a guy that worked for me at Aspen. He still works there. And I had to offer him a job 3 times before he finally came to work for me. And I offered him quite a bit less than he was making at his other job. And over the years, we were able to grow and he was able to catch up and go well beyond what he was making before. But during that time, the company, as we grew from just a handful, 3 or 4 of us, up to 130 employees, there were things that he couldn't do. And I'd given him big titles at first, and I actually had to reduce his title and reduce his position in the company and actually hire people in on top of him. I did that 4 different times. And every time he was upset, but he understood, and eventually he became the most highly compensated executive I had in my team as part of a phantom stock deal that I'd done. But that can be very hard and very painful when you've got people that are really your good friends that help you get started, and sometimes they just aren't the right people for going forward. Letting people go is never pleasant, but it's often best for the person as well as the company. And maybe I just do this to justify it in my mind. I don't think so, but I think everybody I've ever had to let go has ended up in a better place when I've checked on them a year later. And it's usually because they know they're not in the right place and they need to be doing something else. And quite often, as upset as they are when that takes place, nobody likes to be told they're not doing a good job, but they often know when they're not. And it's painful for them too to come to work every day trying to do something they're not qualified to do. Good management should involve reviews that identify areas of needed growth and should act to communicate when the job has outgrown the individual. So you've heard this before, I'm sure, but no one should ever be surprised when they get let go, because they should have been told all along that you've got, here's things we need to work on and we're not getting them done. So they should know ahead of time. The last M is money. And this is where most people start, and it really ought to be the last thing, because if you get the other 3 M's right in business, it's not a guarantee for success, but it's awfully good foundation. And if you get model, market, and management right, usually the money will follow. And I found this to be true for 24 years of just constantly trying to figure out how to manage money. There's the concept of too much and too little. When starting a venture, having too much cash can increase the risk of malinvestment and crush creativity. And I've seen this time and time again. People go out and raise a bunch of money. They establish kind of a culture and a lifestyle for that company that's built on cash that's free and easy. And when the hard times come and the cash gets tight, it's very painful to pull back. The other thing I see happen is there's a lot of malinvestment when there's too much cash up front. You'll try things just because you can. You've got the money to go down here, implement new projects, spend money on things that really may not make sense. Having a limited amount of cash can force the team into having to really make some hard decisions and determine what is it that we really need to be doing. And I would say that there's probably more harm from too much cash than not enough cash. And I know that's a pretty bold statement. We all know how hard it is to raise money. We know how hard it is to try to live without money. But I really, in my experience and working with a lot of other small startups, it's the too much is almost worse than too little. Just creates a culture of recklessness and entitlement and it can make it very, very difficult to navigate those lean times ahead. There's another kind of principle here of too much growth and not enough growth. If you have too much growth, you're going to strip your cash. And this is especially difficult if you're in a manufacturing business or someplace that takes a lot of inventory and you have to wait for receivables and so on. And so I had calculated years ago that 60% growth was about as much as I could ever grow without having outside capital. And sure enough, we got up around 60 or 62% growth year over year. And if I did much more than that, I was going to outstrip my capital and I wouldn't be able to keep up. The other idea to be too successful and not successful enough. And this is kind of a painful one that I think maybe all of us that have had partners have experienced. When a venture is really successful, there's often a battle over credit and ultimately reward. There's a sense that, well, the reason we're successful is because of me and I ought to get more reward. And when the venture is struggling, there's usually a lot of blaming others. Both create a toxic work environment. So I've seen the businesses that seem to do really well are those that just kind of get along and do well and have nice, healthy margins. Again, success can be very, very difficult for people to all agree on who deserves credit for that success. Another principle is cash flow is king. And I think most of you have been involved in business long enough to understand that. You just cannot underestimate the capital needs. In a new venture, it may take 3 times as long as planned and take 3 times as much money as you think it's going to take. And cash flow, even though you might be profitable, if you don't have the cash flow to make payroll or to buy inventory, that can be detrimental or completely take a company down. So the manager has to very carefully monitor cash against the model. And because this is so critical, understanding finance is very helpful. In fact, when I was getting ready to go to graduate school, work on my MBA, I went to an older gentleman that I really respected in business. He said, you really ought to focus on finance because you can hire an accountant, you can hire marketing people, but you really need to understand finance. So finance is incredibly important. And the last point on money is there's a lot of creative ways to fund a business. As I said, I never had any outside investors. I never even had a line of credit. And we continued to grow year over year with some really creative financing, if you will. We would go to vendors, green coffee vendors, and say, look, I know your terms are net 10 days, but I need 90 days, and here's why. And if you'll work with me, I will stay loyal to you and continue to buy coffee from you for years to come. Or I would go to a customer and say, I really want to make this product for you. I know you really want this product. I know you can't go anywhere else to get this product. And so it would be extraordinarily helpful if we could have net 10-day terms, or in some cases, even prepaid on initial orders and things like that. And generally, if you're working with reasonable people, there's quite often an opportunity to get that accomplished. What I found is that even though we were a lean cash business, if we had money in the bank and we had invoices come in, I would have my finance people pay those invoices as soon as they came in. Even if it was a net 30 or 60 or 90 days, if it came in and 10 days later we had the cash, we would pay those. The benefit of that and treating people the way you would like to be treated is that when I did need to go out and ask for longer terms, I almost always got them because people knew that I would treat them honestly and fairly and that I would be good for the money. So sometimes just trying to kind of preset expectations and show people what you're made of when the times are good can really help you when the times are bad. So that's really the 4 M's. I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions or comments. I would imagine with this group, there's probably all sorts of ideas that are just terrific and wonderful around these 4 M's. But anything there before we jump into the next part here?
Sarah, can you turn people on so that everybody can be unmuted for a minute?
So everyone can unmute themselves if they would like to chime in.
Mm-hmm.
Dad, I just wanted to make a small comment. Having run my business for 12 years, grown it from scratch to 100 employees and 20 million, your stories and what you're describing is just causing some chill bumps and hairs to rise on my arm as I'm going through and remembering the ways that we did things, and a few of the things that you mentioned that we didn't do quite as well as you, but some other things that also we did, that I did so much along the same lines. So that's very inspiring. It's driving a lot of thought in my mind as you're going through your speech. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Appreciate that, Andy.
I know that Bill needs to leave at a couple of minutes before 1. So why don't you chime in if you have any more questions, but I did want to thank Bill for coming so much and hope you come again. And go ahead, Chad, if anybody else have questions. Otherwise, maybe Chad can go on to his other gems that he's going to tell us.
These next couple are probably familiar, or the next one is probably familiar, and that's a SWOT analysis. That's strengths and threats, or strengths and weaknesses and threats and opportunities. So SWOT. The strengths and weaknesses are internal. The threats and opportunities are external. So this is, I would imagine everybody's done these SWOT analyses maybe many times, but in our business, we made them a part of every management meeting. And so this became a living, breathing document within our organization. And if we had something that was a new threat or a new strength, we would acknowledge that. And we try to keep the list fairly short. We'd have other lists that we could go to if we wanted to go see what we took off or other things that we think we might want to put on at some point. We tried to keep the list very tight and very short and in four quadrants. And we would rank them and put it right at the top. What's our number one strength? What's our number two? What's our number three? What's our number one opportunity? Number two, number three. And the reason I say this is a living document is because opportunities come and go. Strengths are created through experience. Threats can pop up out of nowhere. And so having that SWOT analysis in front of a management team can be so powerful to help keep everybody on track and to keep you aware of what it is that you need to be paying attention to. The strengths and weaknesses you can work on internally. The external threats and opportunities, those are things you can sometimes create opportunities, sometimes you can create a way to mitigate threats, but the strengths and weaknesses are really what you've got to focus on with your team. The threats and opportunities are what you have to pay attention to in the marketplace. I'm a big fan of Peter Drucker, one of the greatest management teachers of all time. And I remember as a little kid, my dad had volumes of Peter Drucker on the library shelf at home. And I read The Essential Drucker at one time, and I got a wonderful piece of just a pearl of wisdom from him. And he says, as a leader of a company, you need to focus on opportunities. You'll have all sorts of problems. Hire people to take care of as many of your problems as you can, to focus on the opportunities because they only come along so often. And being prepared for those opportunities is absolutely critical, because if that opportunity comes and it goes and you're not ready for it, you haven't prepared for it, it may never come again, or it may take a long time to ever get that opportunity again. So as a leader, it's really critical to focus on the opportunities. And then ask others to tell you what they think. This could be customers, vendors, employees, board members. You might just put a survey out there to customers. What do you think our greatest strength is? Or in our marketplace, in the cold brew coffee business, what do you think the largest threat is to our industry? And it's really amazing how much great information you can get just for free from people. You know, a lot of times we want to go hire consultants or marketing firms to do these things. Most of the time, the information is right there if we just ask for it. So that's that SWOT analysis. Again, there's all sorts of information on the internet about how to do those, how to conduct those, how to do the brainstorming sessions, and so on. I do want to jump to this next one here, though, the MBOSS. And this may be one that people are not familiar with. This was brought to me by one of my board members who did a lot of business consulting. And this is really all about the power of the people. MBOSS stands for eliminate, minimize, build on, and start. And it's a really interesting, simple little exercise. And the whole idea is that you give people a 2-inch Post-it pad and a Sharpie. And you get everybody around in the room, and you really have to split this up where you have your hourly people, your management, maybe board members, different groups, because it's really hard to bridge some of that with different people, and you'll get much different responses. But what you're going to ask everybody to do, and this may be your hourly people, and you may even break it down to a single line. You've got a single production line, and you're going to bring them all in, and you're going to say, we're going to do an emboss activity here. What you say is, I want each of you to write down on a Post-it note 2 things to eliminate. So one thing to eliminate on one Post-it note, another thing to eliminate. And you can have 10 ideas, but you're only going to be able to put 2 down here. So you've got to put those 2 down. And it's a very quick exercise. And you have a moderator, an outside moderator, do this. And then you put them up on a whiteboard and you start to group them. So if you got 15 people in there, you're going to have 30 ideas up on the board. And pretty soon you'll see, well, everybody says we got to eliminate this. You go to the minimize. What do we have that we're doing right now that we should just do less of it? And then what should we build on? Things that we're already doing that we just need to do more of. And then what should we start? Something that we're not doing and we should start it. And taking that and digesting that and putting it into a worksheet is an incredible plan for that team and for your organization. And it's really interesting because you can do this with line workers, you can do it with janitors, you can do it with the board members, and you'll get a very interesting sense of what your people think you should be doing in order to make your business better. All stakeholders can participate, and the discussion and brainstorming that follow is usually really energized because now people have seen their idea up on a board and they've seen a moderator move it around and talk about it. And that's very empowering, especially to somebody that may be quiet and shy and isn't used to having their ideas ever even considered. And it can be extraordinarily powerful. That happens to be a really good idea that the boss says, hey, this is one of the best ideas we've had in a long time. So this is really a good, simple little tool for bringing the team together very quickly. You can do it on just a spur of a moment, and you can list all of those and bring it forward and really have some great ideas. Very simple but effective, and it shows alignment or misalignment very quickly. So that's MBOSS. The last point I'll make here, and then we'll hopefully have a little time for discussion, is about advisory boards. When I was starting my business, I learned about a guy that used to work at Pace Pecani Sauce, and he had his own salsa business here in town. Happened to go to my church, and somebody said, well, if you're going to get in the food and beverage business, you really ought to go talk to Larry. So I went over to Larry and I said, I really need some help. I need some counsel. I don't know, what I'm doing. I'm getting into the food and beverage business, never done this before. And he said, well, I really think you ought to put an advisory board together. And I said, what do you mean? Well, ultimately I ended up putting an advisory board together, and it was all guys that I knew that loved my wife and I, that would be there for us, pray for us, be there to support us. There was only a couple of them that had any real business experience that was applicable. One was real estate and had one attorney. But I had seven people on my advisory board for a one-man company that met in the dining room of my home. And over the next 24 years, we never missed a quarterly board meeting. And the advantage of that to anybody, and even if I know there's a couple of people here, it sounds like you're a one-person operation right now, but the advantage of putting together an advisory board is multifaceted. Number one is once a quarter, you've got to be able to describe to a group of people, pretty sharp people, what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your results have been, what you said you were going to do against what you actually did. And the discipline of that can bring enormous benefit to your business, because during those 3 months before the next board meeting, it's always in the back of your mind, what am I going to tell them? How am I going to do this? Some practical things about the board is not too small and not too large. If you end up with 3 people on your advisory board and 2 of them can't make it, well, you're just having coffee at Starbucks. If you have 20 people, it gets too unwieldy, and there's not enough time for people to get their thoughts in. Accounting and legal are good to have, but those can also be brought in. I'd bring in my CPA or lawyers in for certain parts of meetings if I needed to. And a mix of older and younger. So on my board, I had 3 older guys, gray-haired guys, and 3 guys who were about my age, about 25 years ago. And the younger guys loved to come to the board meetings because they loved to hear what the older guys had to say and glean from their wisdom. You don't want to look for a yes man. You want people that are going to come and really challenge you. It does no good to have a board of people that just nod their head and say, yeah, hey, you're doing a great job. That really doesn't help. And then be prepared to take advice and act on it. and then report back on action taken. So the first item on our board meeting each quarter was action from last board meeting and suggestions that were made. And that was always good because it honored the board members and their contribution. And this advisory board I just put together, I didn't pay them anything. I'd get them a nice fruit basket at Christmas or something like that. I didn't have any money. When we finally got to the point where we paid them a couple $100s for a board meeting later on. But that was really the only perk, was some nice get-togethers at our house at Christmas and the chance to be there, and maybe a couple $100 for a board meeting when I can afford it. When I sold the company, however, I'd had 11 different people serve on my board, and we got a room over at Silo Restaurant there on 1604, and I brought them all together, and I said, guys, I just appreciate you so much. I've got them and their wives together, and appreciate how much you did to help us grow this business. And said, all those lean years, there wasn't much I could do and most of the time those guys would try to hand me the $200 back if I paid them, because they'd say, hey, the company needs it more than I do. Well, that night I handed out over $1 million in checks to those guys, just to say thank you, because I finally could. And it was just a way of just acknowledging all the time that those guys had put in, because they'd come at about 8:30 in the morning, and we'd go until about 12:30 or 1. I'd bring in lunch. I mean, that was a considerable chunk of time for these active, important guys that were giving up their time 4 times a year for that board meeting. Another thought here is an advisory board gives the entrepreneur a place to go when difficult ideas are presented with an expectation of immediate decisions. How often have we had that where your management comes to you and says, we got to do this right now? And it gives the entrepreneur a way to say, let's fly this by the board first. And it really can settle things down. And most people really appreciate that. Well, you think my idea is important enough to take to the board, that they're honored by that as well. An advisory board also gives employees a sense that their leader's being held accountable. And that's so important, because if you got a Lone Ranger leader, it's kind of like, well, I'm trying to get through to him, but would I go to his wife? I would go to her husband. How do I get through to this person? And the board can be a great way for them to have a sense that you're being held accountable. And then the last thing here, and this will be my last point, we'll open it up for questions, but having a board brings in a great network for other networking with other business relationships. I can't tell you how many people my board members introduced me to over the years that were just invaluable business relationships, and many of them are very good friends today. So that advisory board, I always try to keep it from 6 to 8 people on my board. But those boards were always just absolutely instrumental for the growth of my business. So with that, I'll close my remarks and we'll see if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Chad. You've given us so much information and so many great ideas. What is kind of one thing that you suggest leaders really focus on?
When you boil it all down, everything is about people. Then, most people would say business is about money, and you have to make a profit in order to stay in business. But at the end of the day, it's all about people. And if you treat people the way you want to be treated, whether that's employees or vendors or customers, if you just treat people with decency and respect and treat people the way you want to be treated, it's amazing how much life will give back to you. There was a little mirror in my great-grandfather's bathroom. He lived upstairs in my grandparents' home, and had a little saying on it that I memorized when I was probably 5 years old. It says, life is the mirror of every man of what you say and do, and what you give to life will come back to you. And it's, that's been kind of my theme for my businesses and my life, and it's just treat people the way you want to be treated, and put people first. Always put people first, ahead of profits, ahead of the hard decisions. If you put people first, you're still going to have to make some hard decisions, but that's the most important part of business.
I love that.
I have a question, Chad. Can you tell us how you made the leap from being an engineer and into the coffee business?
Yeah, it was called the Great Depression of Houston in the 1980s. I worked for a civil engineering company, and there were about 300 engineers from Turner, Colony, and Braden. And I had my pilot's license.
Chad, something's going on with your sound, or maybe somebody else is interfering, but something all garbled.
Can you hear me now?
It's still garbled.
Let me I'll try something different here. Is that any better? No? I don't know. Let me see here. I've only got a couple selections here on the
That's
sound.
better.
That sounds good.
Is that better?
That's better. Yeah, that's definitely better. Thank you.
Sure. So at any rate, by 1986, Houston was in the tank. I was working on an MBA, going to night school at University of Houston, and I met this family that had the toddy coffee maker. And so I got really interested in that, and I kind of shared some of that story earlier, but I got really interested in this basically a plastic bucket. You put a pound of coffee in, fill it up with water, and soak the coffee overnight. And when you drain it, you end up with this coffee concentrate that you can put in with a shot of with hot water, or you can heat it up in the microwave, and it made a spectacular gourmet cup of coffee. And it was like having instant coffee. It was liquid. Anyway, as I said, I did that for a year. It was too early. I shut that down. I went to work for a large Dutch group, Royal Begeman Group, building equipment for oil processing, hydrocrackers, heat exchangers, pressure vessels. They pulled out of the United States after we moved to San Antonio. My wife, as I said, was a captain in the Air Force, and I was looking for work. And I went by a coffee shop one day, and I saw this frozen coffee drink that wasn't very good. And I said, well, there's a better way to do it. And I showed them, and they said, this is great. We want you to make it. And I said, no, I got to go find a job. You need, I'll show you how to do it. And they said, no, we think this is the time's right. And sure enough, it was. So that was March of '93. And that's the quick version of how I got into the coffee business.
Very cool.
Great story.
Bill, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Bill Leake, and I run a roughly 20-person digital marketing company in Austin. And though I arrived later than I wanted, I've already received value from this. So thank you very much, Chad. I appreciate it.
You bet, Bill. On the story, I might add that Sarah's husband, Tom, I don't know, it's been a couple of years ago now. He's got a great little podcast called, I don't know, Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do or something. What's it called, Sarah?
He actually just changed the name to Making Waves at Sea Level. Sorry, Sea Level.
Okay. Very good. But he interviewed me a couple of years ago, and that podcast is still out there on the net somewhere. I think if you, Tom, T-H-O-M Singer, and Chad McNair, if you put those into a Google search, you'll find that podcast, which goes into a little more of the history and the story behind Aspen Beverage.
And I'm not just pandering to Chad. Tom really did say that Chad was one of his absolute favorite and best interviews he has ever done. So
I'm seeing a question in the chat box from Christine. Christine, do you want to go ahead and ask that, Christine?
Sure. I'm curious what you look for in advisory board members.
Well, that's a great question. The first group I put together, all 7 of those guys went to my church. I just basically went to my Sunday school class and picked up the 4 younger guys and went to some older guys in the church and picked up the 3 older guys. And I just said, look, I need prayer as much as I need anything. So, and those guys committed to coming. And it was an interesting group. It was David McGee, who was at that time president of Chase Bank here in town, Ricky Cooper Sotheby's Real Estate in San Antonio, which is a prominent group here. Bobby Gooch, who's now with Frost Bank, but at the time he was Luby's Cafeterias doing real estate. AC Johnson, who was a retired Air Force personnel officer and was running a ministry called Biblical Leadership for Excellence, which is really taking biblical principles into the workplace. Larry Amstutz, who used to work for Kit Goldsberry at Pace Sauces, Pace Pecani Sauce, and he started his own pecani sauce business called Amigos. Let's see, and Merle Smith. Merle Smith was the CEO of KCI back in the day when they were tearing lumber out of the walls in the warehouse to build shipping crates, and they had no money. Went from 20 million to 200 million under Merle's guidance, and then Merle started Prism Technologies here in San Antonio. Then eventually I had Brad Hunt, who was a business consultant. And so just like the employees I was talking about, over time, you have to change things. And so I had those guys for probably 6 or 7 years, and then eventually I realized I needed a different skill set on my board. So I swapped out a number of them. Then I swapped, I did that again. And I ended up with 11 different people. Only 3 of those were with me the entire time. One was my attorney, Jeff Gately, and Larry Amstutz, who was really my first mentor. So
we have one other question real quick, and then then I'll wrap it up. Did you ever Andy asks, did you ever consider an advisory group like Vistage?
Yes, I was invited to YPO and Visage and C12 and all of those. And the bottom line was I couldn't afford any of them. My wife, when she got out of the military in 1998, we found ourselves with 3 kids. From the time I started the company in 93 to 98, we had 3 kids. And she wanted to be home with the kids. So she worked as a pediatrician on Mondays and Fridays. So she worked 2 days a week. And basically everything I was doing was just putting money right back into the company. So I didn't contribute much to the family finances. And she did that for 13 years until our youngest had his driver's license. And then she went and became a partner and has been full-time since then. But I just didn't have the money to join any of those boards. And I was actually getting an awful lot of benefit out of the boards that I had. And it was a similar sort of setup where I had a variety of business people that were able to give me some great counsel. The other thing I did is, and I've always done, I don't know if I bought 100,000 lunches in my time or what, but all the way back into college, I would find people that I thought were interesting or had done something neat, and I would just ask them for coffee or lunch. And so I mean, somebody said that they finally gone out to eat. I think I've been out to eat 50 or 60 times now since they opened the restaurants back up, or out to coffee. I mean, I just use those opportunities to pour into other people's lives now that I'm where I'm at, a lot of young people, but I still go and seek counsel from an awful lot of people. So networking is really the thing that helped me enormously in my business. And that advisory board and the ACG and the relationships with the San Antonio Manufacturers Association, those sorts of things were extraordinarily important to me.
I love it, Chad. You gave a little push for ACG. Perfect.
Yeah. And I miss getting together. I really do.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I had Charu, I talked to after the mastermind last time, and he thought that maybe we should have a Facebook group or something. Actually, he didn't suggest Facebook. That's the only thing that I'm really familiar with, so that people can we can put like resources in that and stuff like that. So I'd like to take a real quick survey here on if that would be something that you guys would be interested in. You wouldn't necessarily have to do anything with it, but it would just be a resource place where we could put stuff. We might even be able to put the videos there. Great. Okay, sounds like that would be of interest. If you have other ideas of other platforms, let me know, but that's the one that has seemed to work best in my experience. The other thing is the chat box. Be sure to save the chat box and put in, if you haven't put your contact information, go ahead and put it in there. Oh, and let me put up one more time share the screen on this. The next mastermind, several of the people here came to that last time. It was just really valuable. You get about 10 minutes to share what's going on with you, and then we all kind of help each other. So invite you to that. We're just about up on our time. Chad, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I saw you put your contact information, so if anybody wants to reach out to him, maybe you can do that. Really appreciated it. Susan, do you have anything to say before we close?
No, just please do check out that event on the 14th. And I know there's another global event that sounded really good on global M&A activity updates. So that's on the website. But thank you, Carrie.
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
Susan.
your leadership.
Sarah, do you have anything to add? Thank you so much for being our person who took care of things in the background. Really appreciate you in so many ways. So that we will be having another roundtable probably the 1st of August, I believe it, September, I believe it is. But we'll be announcing who the speaker is in the next week or two. So thank you everyone for coming. I really do appreciate you all, and thank you, Chad.